3,000 years ago, long before the age of satellites, GPS, or even compasses, ancient sailors navigated the vast, unpredictable waters of the Mediterranean with nothing but the stars, the wind, and their wits. These were the Phoenicians, master mariners whose ships carried goods, ideas, and cultures across continents, laying the very foundations of global trade. But here's the mystery: how did they do it? How did they cross thousands of miles of open water without maps or modern tools? And what secrets do the sunken shipwrecks scattered across the ocean floor hold about these ancient trade routes? Today, we're diving into the hidden history of ancient maritime trade networks, a story that's as much about adventure as it is about archaeology. From the bustling ports of ancient Tyre to the distant shores of the Mediterranean and beyond, we'll uncover how these ancient sailors connected the world in ways that still shape us today. Along the way, we'll explore the clues left behind shipwrecks, artifacts, and forgotten texts that tell the story of these daring voyages. So, if you've ever wondered how the ancient world traded, thrived, and survived, get ready for a journey that will forever change how you see the past and the present. The story of maritime trade begins in the shadows of the Bronze Age, a time when civilizations first dared to venture beyond their shores in search of something greater. Picture this: around 3,500 years ago, the Minoans of Crete and the ancient Egyptians were already mastering the art of sailing, not just for exploration but for trade. These early seafarers set out across the Mediterranean, braving unpredictable waters to exchange goods like copper, tin, and luxury items such as gold, ivory, and precious stones. Why? Because no single civilization had everything it needed within its borders. Copper, essential for making tools and weapons, was scarce in Egypt but abundant in places like Cyprus. Tin, a key ingredient for bronze, had to be sourced from as far away as Afghanistan. And so, the seeds of maritime trade were sown out of necessity. Geography played a starring role in this unfolding drama. The Mediterranean Sea, with its calm waters and proximity to so many diverse cultures, became the world's first superhighway of trade. Its natural harbors and predictable winds made it easier for ships to navigate, connecting the Minoans, Egyptians, Phoenicians, and others in a vibrant web of commerce. But it wasn't just about convenience. The Mediterranean was a meeting point, a place where ideas, technologies, and cultures could mingle as freely as the goods being traded. This exchange didn't just enrich economies, it shaped the very fabric of these early societies. What's truly fascinating is how these early trade networks laid the groundwork for something even more remarkable. Behind every journey across the seas was a story of innovation: ships that could carry heavier loads, navigation techniques that could guide sailors by the stars, and harbors that grew into bustling hubs of activity. These advancements didn't just make trade possible, they transformed it into a driving force of human progress. And as we'll see next, it was these very innovations that allowed maritime trade to evolve from a risky venture into a cornerstone of civilization. The story of ancient maritime trade begins with the ships themselves, crafted not just as vessels, but as masterpieces of innovation and engineering. Picture the Egyptians gliding along the Nile in boats made of papyrus reeds, lightweight and perfectly suited for their riverine environment. These early vessels were more than just floating platforms. They were a testament to human ingenuity, designed to carry goods, people, and even the stones used to build the pyramids. But as trade routes expanded beyond rivers and into the open sea, shipbuilders faced new challenges, and their designs evolved to meet them. Enter the Phoenicians, the ancient world's undisputed masters of shipbuilding. Their triremes, sleek and formidable, were the sports cars of the Mediterranean. Built with sturdy cedar wood from the forests of Lebanon, these ships were designed for both speed and durability. The Phoenicians didn't just build boats, they engineered floating fortresses capable of withstanding the unpredictable waves of the open sea. The secret. A combination of advanced techniques and carefully chosen materials. Cedar wood, for example, was prized for its resistance to rot and its natural oils, which repelled water and pests. This wasn't just about creating a ship, it was about crafting a tool for survival and success in a world where the sea was both a highway and a hazard. Over time, ship designs became more sophisticated. The Greeks and Romans adopted and improved upon Phoenician techniques, creating larger vessels capable of carrying heavier cargo. These ships weren't just functional, they were symbols of power and prosperity. The keel, a central structural element, provided stability, while the use of multiple sails allowed for greater maneuverability. Each innovation was a response to the demands of trade, carrying more goods, traveling farther, and navigating rougher waters. But building a ship was only half the battle. The real challenge lay in navigating the unpredictable and often treacherous seas. How did ancient mariners, armed with little more than the stars and their instincts, manage to cross vast distances without modern tools? That's a story of its own, one that takes us from the calm waters of the Mediterranean to the storm-tossed waves of the open ocean. Imagine setting sail across the vast, open ocean with no GPS, no compass, and no modern maps to guide you. For ancient mariners, this was the reality, yet they managed to traverse incredible distances, reaching far-off lands with nothing but the sky above and the world around them as their guides. Their secret, a deep understanding of the natural world and a collection of ingenious tools that turned the heavens into a roadmap. One of the most remarkable tools in their arsenal was the astrolabe, a device that allowed sailors to measure the angle of the sun or stars above the horizon. By calculating these angles, they could determine their latitude, how far north or south they were from the equator. It wasn't just a tool, it was their lifeline, a way to make sense of the seemingly endless expanse of water. But the astrolabe wasn't their only guide. Constellations like the North Star, Polaris, became their constant companions. Unlike other stars that moved across the night sky, Polaris remained fixed, pointing true north. For sailors, it was like having a celestial lighthouse, always there to steer them in the right direction. But what about when the stars were hidden by clouds or the sun was obscured? That's when natural landmarks came into play. Experienced navigators memorized the shapes of coastlines, the patterns of waves, and even the behavior of birds. These subtle cues, often overlooked by the untrained eye, were vital for staying on course. It's a testament to their resourcefulness. They didn't just rely on one method, but combined multiple techniques to navigate with precision. The ingenuity of these early navigators is nothing short of awe-inspiring. Without the advanced technology we take for granted today, they charted courses across uncharted waters, connecting distant civilizations and laying the groundwork for the global trade networks we know today. Their journeys weren't just about reaching a destination, they were about exploration, discovery, and the relentless pursuit of the unknown. And these voyages didn't just bring goods from one place to another, they brought ideas, traditions, and cultures. As ships sailed from port to port, they carried more than cargo. They carried the seeds of cultural exchange, planting them in new lands and fostering connections that would shape the course of history. This brings us to the next chapter of this story, the remarkable cultural exchanges that emerged from these ancient maritime journeys. Maritime trade networks were far more than just pathways for goods. They were vibrant corridors of cultural exchange where ideas, art, and beliefs flowed as freely as the cargo on the ships. Picture this: a Greek merchant ship docks in an Indian port, its hull filled with amphorae of wine and intricately painted pottery. But it's not just the goods that make the journey. The designs on those pots, scenes of gods, heroes, and daily life carry stories and symbols that spark curiosity and inspiration in distant lands. Before long, Indian artisans are incorporating Greek motifs into their own work, creating a fascinating fusion of styles that speaks to a shared artistic conversation across oceans. And it wasn't just art that traveled. Religious ideas spread along these routes too. Buddhist sculptures, for instance, began appearing in Roman markets, their serene faces and intricate carvings catching the eye of traders and travelers. These sculptures weren't just exotic curiosities, they were evidence of a deeper connection, a spiritual dialogue between cultures that might otherwise have remained isolated. In places like the ancient port city of Alexandria, you'd find temples dedicated to Greek, Egyptian, and Indian deities standing side by side, a testament to the blending of faiths and philosophies that maritime trade made possible. Innovations also sailed along these routes. Writing systems, for example, evolved as merchants and scribes adapted scripts to better communicate across linguistic barriers. Architectural styles, too, began to merge, with columns and arches from the Mediterranean appearing in structures as far east as India. These exchanges weren't just superficial. They reshaped societies, leaving lasting legacies that still echo today. But what's perhaps most fascinating is how these cultural exchanges weren't one-sided. They were a dynamic, reciprocal process. Indian spices might have been traded for Roman gold, but along the way, ideas about governance, science, and philosophy were also bartered, enriching both sides. This constant flow of knowledge and creativity laid the groundwork for a more interconnected world, one where innovation thrived because cultures were willing to learn from one another. And while the cultural impact of these exchanges is undeniable, it's worth considering how they also shaped economies. When cultures blend, so do markets, creating new demands and opportunities that drive trade even further. But that's a story for another moment. For now, let's marvel at how these ancient maritime routes didn't just move goods, they moved minds, leaving behind a legacy of shared creativity and understanding that still resonates today. The ancient world's economic engine didn't run on land, it sailed across the seas. Maritime trade was the lifeblood of empires, connecting distant corners of the globe and transforming raw materials into symbols of prestige and power. The Phoenicians, master navigators of the Mediterranean, were among the first to realize the potential of the open waters. They traded purple dye, a rare and luxurious commodity derived from sea snails, which became a status symbol for royalty across the ancient world. But it wasn't just the Phoenicians. The Romans, too, built their empire on the back of maritime commerce, importing everything from silk and spices to gold and silver, which flowed through their vast trade networks like veins carrying wealth to the heart of their civilization. What made these goods so valuable wasn't just their rarity, it was the stories they carried. Silk from China wasn't just fabric, it was a whisper of the exotic East, a tangible connection to a world that felt impossibly distant. Spices like cinnamon and pepper weren't just seasonings, they were treasures that could transform a meal into a feast fit for kings, and precious metals. They weren't merely currency, they were the glittering proof of an empire's reach and influence. These items became more than commodities, they became symbols of status, power, and cultural exchange. But trade didn't just enrich empires, it built cities. Ports like Alexandria in Egypt and Carthage in North Africa became bustling hubs of commerce, where goods, ideas, and people converged. Alexandria, with its legendary lighthouse guiding ships into its harbor, was a melting pot of cultures where Greek, Egyptian, and Persian traders mingled under the watchful eye of the Ptolemaic rulers. Carthage, on the other hand, was a testament to the power of strategic location, dominating the Western Mediterranean and controlling the flow of goods between Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. These cities thrived because they were more than just stops along a trade route. They were the beating hearts of ancient economies. Yet, as we marvel at the wealth and innovation these trade networks brought, it's important to remember that not everything about them was glittering gold. Behind the luxury goods and bustling ports lay a darker reality, one of exploitation, conflict, and human cost. This shadowy side of ancient maritime trade is where our journey takes us next, as we uncover the untold stories of those who paid the price for the riches that built empires. The ancient seas were not just highways of commerce, they were battlegrounds. As goods like silk, spices, and gold flowed across vast distances, so too did the threat of piracy and conflict. From the Mediterranean to the Indian Ocean, merchant ships faced constant danger. Pirates, often operating from hidden coves or remote islands, preyed on vulnerable vessels, seizing cargo and holding crews for ransom. But it wasn't just rogue bands of raiders causing trouble. Entire empires clashed over control of these lucrative trade routes, turning the high seas into a theater of war. Take the Roman Empire, for example. At its height, Rome's dominance over the Mediterranean was unchallenged, but maintaining that control meant constant vigilance. The empire's navy patrolled the waters, protecting merchant ships from pirate attacks and rival powers. Similarly, the Persian Empire, with its vast network of trade routes stretching from the Persian Gulf to the Red Sea, had to defend its interests against both pirates and competing states. These empires didn't just rely on brute force, they developed sophisticated strategies to safeguard their trade. One of the most effective was the convoy system, where merchant ships traveled in groups escorted by armed warships. This made it harder for pirates to pick off individual vessels and ensured a safer passage for valuable cargo. Fortified ports also played a crucial role. Cities like Alexandria and Carthage became hubs of trade and military power, with walls, watchtowers, and garrisons protecting the flow of goods. These ports weren't just stops along the way, they were fortresses designed to repel attacks and secure the wealth flowing through them. But even with these measures, the seas remained a perilous place. Naval battles between rival empires were common, with control of key trade routes often hanging in the balance. The stakes were high, and the consequences of defeat could mean the collapse of entire economies. Yet, despite the dangers, trade continued to thrive. Why? Because the rewards were simply too great to ignore. The wealth generated by maritime trade funded empires, built cities, and connected distant cultures. And as we'll see in the next section, it wasn't just goods that traveled these routes, ideas did too. Religion, in particular, played a fascinating role in shaping the world of ancient maritime trade, spreading beliefs and practices across continents and influencing everything from politics to daily life. But that's a story for another moment. For now, let's just marvel at the courage and cunning of those who dared to sail the ancient seas, braving pirates, storms, and empires to bring the world closer together. Religion and maritime trade were deeply intertwined, shaping the very fabric of ancient commerce. For the Phoenicians, who dominated the Mediterranean seas, their reverence for sea gods like Yam and Baal-Hamon wasn't just spiritual, it was practical. They believed these deities controlled the waves, storms, and winds, and so sailors would offer prayers and sacrifices before embarking on perilous journeys. Temples dedicated to these gods often stood at the heart of bustling port cities, serving as both spiritual sanctuaries and social hubs where traders and sailors exchanged goods and stories. These sacred spaces weren't just about faith, they were vital to the success of trade, offering protection and blessings for those who risked their lives on the open sea. But religion didn't just stay within the confines of port cities, it traveled. Take Buddhism, for example. As merchants moved along the Silk Road, they didn't just carry silk and spices, they also brought ideas. Buddhist missionaries and pilgrims hitched rides on these trade routes, spreading their teachings from India to China and beyond. monasteries began to spring up along these pathways, offering rest and refuge to weary travelers while also serving as cultural and religious centers. These monasteries became crucial nodes in the network, blending commerce with spirituality in ways that shaped entire regions, and it wasn't just about spreading faith. Religion also influenced trade practices. In many cultures, oaths sworn before gods were considered unbreakable, creating a system of trust that allowed deals to flourish across vast distances. Port cities often boasted shrines where sailors could pray for safe voyages, and traders would leave offerings in gratitude for successful journeys. These rituals weren't mere formalities, they were the glue that held together fragile alliances between distant peoples. As we've seen, religion wasn't just a passive passenger on these ancient trade routes. It was an active force shaping the way people connected, traded, and trusted one another. But while gods and missionaries played their part, there's another group whose contributions often go unnoticed: women. From merchants to artisans, women were vital to the success of these networks, weaving their own stories into the fabric of history. While the bustling ports and trade routes of the ancient world are often depicted as male-dominated spaces, the truth is far more complex and fascinating. Women played a vital, though often overlooked, role in shaping these maritime networks. From merchants and artisans to powerful figures who sponsored voyages, women were integral to the flow of goods, ideas, and culture across the seas. Take ancient Egypt, for example, where women like Queen Hatshepsut weren't just passive observers of trade, they were active participants. Hatshepsut, one of the most remarkable female pharaohs, famously sponsored a monumental trading expedition to the land of Punt, a region rich in exotic goods like myrrh, gold, and ebony. This wasn't just a display of wealth, it was a strategic move to strengthen Egypt's economy and secure its dominance in the Mediterranean trade network. The reliefs carved into her temple at Deir el-Bahri vividly depict the ships laden with treasures, a testament to her vision and influence. But it wasn't just queens and elites who left their mark. In ancient Greece, women often managed family businesses, including those tied to maritime trade. They oversaw the production of goods like pottery, textiles, and olive oil products that were highly sought after in foreign markets. Some even owned ships, a rare but significant achievement in societies where women's roles were typically confined to the domestic sphere. These women worked behind the scenes, negotiating deals, managing resources, and ensuring their goods reached distant shores. Even in cultures where women weren't always visible in the public sphere, their contributions were undeniable. Artisans, particularly in textile production, created goods that became staples of trade. The intricate fabrics and dyes produced by women in places like Phoenicia were prized across the ancient world, becoming symbols of wealth and status. Their work, though often anonymous, fueled the very heart of maritime commerce. The stories of these women remind us that history is rarely as straightforward as it seems. While their roles might not always have been celebrated or recorded in the same way as their male counterparts, their influence was profound. And as we shift our focus to the next chapter of this story, we'll explore another group whose contributions were equally essential, yet often forgotten: the enslaved people who labored to keep these trade networks alive. Their stories, like those of the women who came before them, reveal the complex and interconnected nature of ancient maritime trade. The bustling ports and powerful ships of ancient maritime trade were not just engines of commerce, they were also built on the backs of human suffering. Enslavement and forced labor were deeply woven into the fabric of these early networks, shaping economies and societies in ways that still echo today. Enslaved people were more than just laborers, they were commodities traded like goods across vast distances. On ships, they often served as rowers, powering vessels through treacherous waters under brutal conditions. In ports, they loaded and unloaded cargo, repaired ships, and performed countless other tasks that kept the trade machine running. These individuals, torn from their homes and families, endured unimaginable hardships, yet their stories are also ones of incredible resilience and resistance. In many cases, enslaved workers found ways to assert their humanity, whether through subtle acts of defiance or outright rebellion. Some managed to escape, blending into new communities or forging paths to freedom. Others used their skills and knowledge to gain small measures of autonomy, proving that even in the face of oppression, the human spirit could not be extinguished. The impact of this system was profound, not just on the individuals who suffered, but on the societies that relied on their labor. Entire economies were built around the exploitation of human lives, leaving a legacy that would shape the course of history. As we reflect on this dark chapter, it's impossible to ignore the echoes of these practices in later periods of history, reminding us of the long shadows cast by ancient trade networks. But the story of maritime trade isn't only about people. Animals, too, played a vital role in these exchanges, serving as both cargo and companions in the journey across the seas. From the camels that carried goods across deserts to the ship's animals that provided food and labor, their contributions were essential to the success of these early trade routes. And that's where we turn next, exploring the unsung heroes of ancient trade, the animals that helped move the world. But let's not forget, trade wasn't just about goods and spices. Animals played a surprisingly pivotal role in the ancient maritime world, acting as both cargo and catalysts for commerce. Picture this: camels, elephants, and even horses, creatures built for land, being loaded onto ships and sent across vast oceans. It wasn't just about moving goods, it was about moving the very engines of trade and warfare themselves. Camels, for instance, were the backbone of overland trade routes, able to traverse deserts and harsh terrains where no wheeled cart could go. But to get these desert specialists to new regions, they had to travel by sea. Imagine the logistics of loading a ship with camels, creatures not exactly known for their love of water. The same went for elephants, massive and powerful, yet incredibly sensitive to their environment. Transporting them required not just sturdy ships, but careful planning to keep them calm and healthy during long voyages. Horses, too, were in high demand, especially for warfare and cavalry units, but their transport posed its own set of challenges. These animals were not just cargo, they were living, breathing investments, and losing even one could mean a significant financial blow. The challenges of transporting live animals were immense. Ships had to be modified to accommodate their size and needs, with enough space for movement, food, and water. Disease outbreaks were a constant threat, and the stress of the journey often took a toll on the animals, leaving them weakened or even dead upon arrival. Yet, despite these difficulties, the rewards were worth it. Animals like camels and elephants became indispensable in regions where they were introduced, transforming local economies and even ecosystems. Camels, for example, became the lifeline of desert trade routes, enabling the movement of goods between maritime ports and inland markets. Elephants, on the other hand, were not just beasts of burden. They were symbols of power used in both construction and warfare, reshaping the political landscapes they entered. But this exchange wasn't without consequences. Introducing foreign animals into new ecosystems often disrupted the delicate balance of local flora and fauna. In some cases, these animals outcompeted native species, leading to long-term ecological changes. Yet, their impact on trade was undeniable. They bridged the gap between land and sea, connecting distant regions and facilitating the flow of goods, ideas, and cultures. And speaking of connections, while animals were shaping trade routes, nature itself had a hand in reshaping the course of history. Storms, earthquakes, and other natural disasters didn't just disrupt trade, they often rerouted it entirely, creating new opportunities and challenges for ancient merchants. But that's a story for the next chapter. Picture this, a thriving ancient port bustling with activity, ships laden with exotic goods ready to set sail. But beneath the surface of this prosperity lay a constant threat: nature's fury. Earthquakes, tsunamis, and violent storms didn't just disrupt these maritime trade routes, they could wipe them out entirely. One of the most dramatic examples was the eruption of Thera, a volcanic event so catastrophic that it reshaped the Mediterranean world. Around 1600 BC, this colossal explosion sent shockwaves across the sea, devastating the Minoan civilization. Their once thriving trade networks crumbled under the weight of ash, tidal waves, and the loss of key ports. It wasn't just a momentary setback, it was a turning point in history. But nature's disruptions weren't limited to volcanic eruptions. Storms at sea could be just as deadly. Ancient mariners faced the constant risk of shipwrecks, with entire cargoes lost to the depths. Imagine a merchant ship loaded with precious spices, textiles, and metals, caught in a sudden tempest. The crew's survival was uncertain, and the economic ripple effects could cripple entire trade networks. These disasters forced societies to innovate. Shipbuilders began crafting sturdier vessels capable of weathering rough seas. Sailors learned to navigate around dangerous routes, avoiding storm-prone areas. And entire cities adapted, moving their ports to safer locations or creating backup trade paths. Yet, even with these adaptations, the unpredictability of natural disasters kept ancient traders on edge. It wasn't just about losing goods, it was about losing connections. Trade wasn't merely an economic activity, it was a lifeline that linked cultures, technologies, and ideas. When a storm sank a ship or an earthquake destroyed a port, those connections were severed, often for years, but out of these challenges emerged resilience. Societies learned to diversify their trade routes, relying on multiple pathways to ensure survival. They built stronger alliances with neighboring regions, creating networks that could withstand the blows of nature. This resilience wasn't just about survival, it was about adaptation. The disruptions caused by natural disasters pushed ancient civilizations to think creatively, to innovate, and to collaborate. And as they did, they laid the groundwork for something even more powerful: diplomacy. Because when the seas grew too dangerous or the land too unstable, it wasn't just ships and ports that needed to adapt, it was the relationships between people. And that's where the story takes an even more fascinating turn. Imagine a world where empires, separated by vast deserts and towering mountains, found ways to connect not through conquest but through diplomacy. At the heart of ancient maritime trade networks lay a delicate dance of negotiation, where alliances were forged not just for power but for prosperity. Empires understood that securing trade routes wasn't just about controlling territory, it was about fostering relationships that could weather storms, both literal and political. One of the most fascinating aspects of these ancient trade networks was the role of diplomacy. Treaties and trade agreements were the lifeblood of these exchanges, ensuring that goods could flow freely across borders without the constant threat of conflict. Take, for example, the Silk Road agreements between Rome and China. These weren't just simple handshakes, they were carefully crafted deals that allowed silk, spices, and other luxury goods to travel thousands of miles, enriching both empires. Roman and Chinese ambassadors played a crucial role in these negotiations, acting as cultural bridges between two vastly different worlds. Their work wasn't just about commerce, it was about understanding and respect, ensuring that both sides felt valued and heard. But diplomacy wasn't just about high-level treaties, it also happened on a smaller, more personal scale. Local rulers and merchants often formed alliances to protect their shared interests, creating networks of trust that spanned generations. These alliances were sometimes sealed with gifts, marriages, or even shared religious practices, blending cultures in ways that went beyond mere trade. The success of these diplomatic efforts hinged on one crucial factor: communication. And as we'll soon see, language played a pivotal role in shaping these ancient trade networks, acting as the glue that held empires and merchants together across vast distances. One of the most fascinating aspects of ancient maritime trade was how traders from vastly different cultures managed to communicate across language barriers. Imagine a Phoenician merchant negotiating with a Greek sailor, or a Chinese trader haggling with an Indian counterpart. How did they bridge the gap between their languages? The answer lies in a combination of ingenuity, necessity, and cultural adaptation. Interpreters played a crucial role in these exchanges. Often, multilingual individuals, sometimes even former slaves or travelers, would act as intermediaries, translating goods, prices, and terms of agreement. But as trade networks expanded, something even more remarkable emerged: the development of trade languages. One of the most famous examples is the lingua franca, a simplified mix of Italian, French, Greek, Arabic, and other Mediterranean languages. This pidgin language became the go-to way for sailors and merchants to communicate, even if they didn't share a native tongue. Writing systems also played a vital role in overcoming communication challenges. Contracts, inventories, and trade agreements were often recorded in cuneiform, hieroglyphics, or early forms of writing like linear A and B. These documents weren't just practical tools, they were also a way to build trust between strangers. A signed contract, even if written in a script the other party couldn't fully understand, symbolized a shared commitment to the deal. But language wasn't just about trade, it was a vehicle for cultural exchange. Multilingual traders didn't just exchange goods, they shared stories, ideas, and even religious beliefs. A merchant fluent in both Sanskrit and Arabic might introduce Indian spices to the Middle East while bringing back tales of Islamic art and architecture. These interactions laid the groundwork for the interconnected world we live in today. As we've seen, language was the glue that held ancient maritime trade together. But there was another critical element that made these exchanges possible: money. Next, we'll explore how coins and currency revolutionized trade, turning local transactions into a global economy. Imagine a world where every transaction required haggling over the value of goods, a world without a universal system to measure worth. Now picture the moment when that changed forever. The invention of coins in ancient Lydia around the 7th century BCE didn't just simplify trade. It transformed the very fabric of commerce, especially across the vast networks of maritime trade. These small, stamped pieces of metal became a game-changer, offering a standardized medium of exchange that could be trusted and recognized far beyond local markets. The Lydians, located in modern-day Turkey, were the first to mint coins made from electrum, a natural alloy of gold and silver. These early coins were imprinted with symbols to certify their weight and purity, a revolutionary concept that spread like wildfire. From Lydia, the practice of coinage traveled across the Mediterranean, adopted by Greek city-states, Persian empires, and eventually the Roman world. This wasn't just about convenience, it was about trust. For the first time, merchants from distant lands could engage in trade without the uncertainty of bartering or the risk of carrying heavy, unmarked metal. Coins became the lifeblood of maritime trade routes, enabling sailors and traders to move goods across vast distances with confidence. A Phoenician merchant in Carthage could now trade with a Greek trader in Athens, both relying on the same system of value. This standardization didn't just boost trade, it laid the groundwork for the rise of banking systems. Moneylenders and financiers emerged, offering loans and credit to fund voyages, creating a web of economic interdependence that spanned continents. But coins did more than just facilitate trade. They became a symbol of power and influence. Rulers used them to project their authority, stamping their faces and emblems on every piece of currency. This wasn't just money, it was propaganda circulating far and wide, spreading the reputation of empires with every transaction. As we marvel at the ingenuity of ancient coinage, it's worth remembering that trade wasn't just about money. The next chapter of this story takes us to the very heart of human survival, food. From grains to spices, the exchange of edible goods shaped civilizations in ways that coins alone could never achieve. How did food become one of the most powerful commodities in history? That's where our journey heads next. Imagine a world without pepper in your soup, cinnamon in your tea, or oranges on your breakfast table. It's hard to picture, right? Yet, before ancient maritime trade networks connected distant corners of the globe, many of the foods we take for granted today were completely unknown in certain regions. These networks didn't just move goods, they transformed entire diets, cuisines, and even cultures. Take spices, for example. In ancient times, spices like black pepper, cinnamon, and cloves were worth their weight in gold. They traveled thousands of miles from Southeast Asia and India to reach the tables of European nobility, not just as flavor enhancers but as symbols of wealth and status. The demand for these exotic flavors didn't just spice up meals, it fueled entire economies and shaped the course of history. But it wasn't just spices making their way across the seas. Citrus fruits like lemons and oranges were introduced to the Mediterranean through trade routes that linked the East and West. These fruits didn't just add a burst of flavor to local dishes. They revolutionized agriculture, providing new crops that thrived in the region's climate. Over time, they became staples of Mediterranean cuisine, ingrained in the cultural identity of the people who lived there. Food, as it turns out, is more than just sustenance. It's a reflection of identity, a marker of heritage, and a bridge between cultures. The exchange of culinary traditions through maritime trade didn't just change what people ate, it changed how they saw themselves and others. It created a shared global palate, blending flavors and techniques in ways that continue to influence our meals today. And while food was a vital part of this exchange, it wasn't the only thing traveling across the waves. Luxury goods and artistic treasures were also on the move, shaping societies in profound ways. From intricate pottery to shimmering silks, these items carried stories, ideas, and innovations from one civilization to another. But that's a tale for the next part of our journey. Imagine a Roman noblewoman draped in shimmering silk so fine it feels like air, or a Mesopotamian king seated on a throne adorned with intricately carved ivory. These luxury items didn't just appear in their hands, they traveled thousands of miles across oceans, carried by ancient maritime trade networks that connected distant civilizations. Long before the modern era, ships laden with art, jewelry, and other treasures crisscrossed the seas, turning the world into a vibrant marketplace of culture and craftsmanship. Take Chinese silk, for example. This exquisite fabric, prized for its softness and luster, made its way to Rome, where it became a symbol of wealth and status. Roman elites were willing to pay exorbitant amounts for this rare material, which had to be transported across the vast expanse of the Silk Road before reaching Mediterranean ports. But silk wasn't the only luxury good on the move. Indian ivory, meticulously carved into ornate sculptures and furniture, found its way to Mesopotamia and beyond, showcasing the incredible skill of artisans who transformed raw materials into masterpieces. These goods weren't just beautiful, they were power. Owning foreign luxuries signaled prestige, connecting elites to far-off lands and exotic cultures. A single piece of jewelry or a finely woven textile could tell a story of influence, ambition, and global connections. And behind every item was a network of traders, sailors, and craftspeople who made these exchanges possible. But what made such trade possible on such a grand scale? The answer lies in the technology and innovation that powered ancient maritime networks. From the design of ships to the tools used for navigation, these advancements were the unsung heroes of the luxury trade. And that's where our journey takes us next, into the fascinating world of ancient maritime technology. But how exactly did these ancient maritime trade networks drive such remarkable technological advancements? The answer lies in the constant push for efficiency and survival. Imagine a merchant vessel setting sail across the open sea, carrying not just goods but the hopes of entire communities. To make these journeys safer, faster, and more profitable, shipbuilders and sailors had to innovate. Over time, this led to the development of stronger, more durable ships. For example, the Chinese junk, with its advanced rudder system and watertight compartments, became a marvel of engineering, allowing traders to navigate treacherous waters with greater confidence. Similarly, the Arabs perfected the lateen sail, a triangular design that allowed ships to harness the wind more effectively, even against strong currents. Navigation tools also saw incredible progress. Early mariners relied on the stars to guide them, but as trade routes expanded, so did the need for precision. The astrolabe, originally developed by the Greeks and later refined by Islamic scholars, became an essential tool for determining latitude at sea. This exchange of knowledge wasn't just about hardware, it was about ideas. Take papermaking, for instance. This revolutionary technology, first developed in China, traveled westward through trade routes, eventually reaching the Islamic world and later Europe. It wasn't just paper that moved, it was the very concept of preserving and sharing knowledge which would later fuel the Renaissance and beyond. Innovation wasn't limited to tools and techniques, it also reshaped the way societies interacted. The creation of standardized weights and measures, for example, allowed traders from vastly different cultures to conduct business with trust and efficiency. Maritime trade became a melting pot of ideas, where the best practices of one culture were adopted and adapted by another. This cross-pollination of knowledge didn't just expand trade networks, it transformed them into engines of progress, connecting distant civilizations in ways that were unimaginable before. Yet, as we marvel at these achievements, it's worth asking, what happens when such a vibrant system begins to falter? The decline of ancient maritime trade networks wasn't sudden or simple. It was shaped by a complex web of factors, from shifting political landscapes to environmental changes. But that's a story for the next chapter, one that reveals how even the most robust systems can face challenges that reshape the course of history. The once thriving maritime trade networks that connected ancient civilizations didn't disappear overnight. Instead, their decline was a gradual process shaped by a combination of political upheaval, shifting economic priorities, and even the spread of disease. One of the most significant blows came with the fall of the Roman Empire in the 5th century. Rome had been a central hub for trade, linking the Mediterranean with distant markets in India, Arabia, and beyond. But as the empire fragmented, so too did the stability of the trade routes it had sustained. Without the Roman navy to protect shipping lanes and the Roman economy to fuel demand, many ports fell into disuse and the flow of goods slowed to a trickle. At the same time, new powers began to rise, reshaping the map of global commerce. The Islamic caliphates, for example, emerged as dominant players in the 7th century, redirecting trade through their own networks. Overland routes like the Silk Road also gained prominence, offering alternatives to the maritime paths that had once been so vital. And then there were the diseases. The plague of Justinian in the 6th century devastated populations across the Mediterranean, crippling economies and further disrupting trade. It's a stark reminder of how interconnected these ancient networks were and how fragile they could be in the face of widespread crisis. Yet, despite these challenges, not all was lost. Some trade networks adapted, evolving to meet the demands of a changing world. In the Indian Ocean, for instance, merchants continued to sail between East Africa, Arabia, and India, laying the groundwork for the medieval trade systems that would later flourish. These resilient networks proved that even in the face of decline, the spirit of maritime commerce could endure. This raises an intriguing question. What legacy did these ancient trade networks leave behind? How did their influence shape the world that came after them? That's where we're headed next, as we explore the lasting impact of these maritime connections and how they continue to echo through history. The ancient maritime trade networks were far more than just routes for exchanging goods. They were the lifeblood of cultural exchange, technological innovation, and the spread of ideas. These networks laid the groundwork for the interconnected world we live in today, shaping the very foundation of modern globalization. Think about it, the spices, silks, and precious stones that traveled across oceans thousands of years ago didn't just fill markets, they connected civilizations, sparking curiosity and collaboration between distant peoples. It's fascinating to realize how these ancient traders were, in many ways, the first globalists, bridging gaps between cultures and fostering a sense of shared humanity long before the term globalization even existed. One of the most profound legacies of these networks is how they influenced later trade systems, particularly the Silk Road. While the Silk Road is often associated with overland routes, its maritime counterpart played an equally vital role. Ships carried not only goods but also knowledge, scientific ideas, religious beliefs, and artistic styles flowed freely across the seas. This exchange didn't just enrich individual societies, it created a tapestry of shared progress. For instance, the spread of Buddhism from India to East Asia, or the transfer of navigational techniques from Arab sailors to European explorers, were direct results of these ancient maritime connections. These networks didn't just move products, they moved the world forward. But what can we learn from these early explorers and traders? Their courage and ingenuity remind us that exploration isn't just about discovering new lands, it's about building bridges between people. They faced uncharted waters, unpredictable weather, and countless risks, yet they persisted, driven by curiosity and the desire to connect. In many ways, their spirit lives on in today's global economy, where trade and collaboration continue to shape our world. Yet, unlike the ancient traders who relied on the stars and wind, we now navigate with satellites and digital networks. The tools have changed, but the essence of connection remains the same. As we reflect on these ancient networks, it's impossible not to wonder, what secrets of the past are still waiting to be uncovered? Modern discoveries are shedding new light on these ancient routes, revealing stories that have been hidden beneath the waves for centuries. From sunken ships to forgotten ports, each find adds another piece to the puzzle, helping us better understand how these early traders shaped the world we know today. And that brings us to our next chapter, modern discoveries that are rewriting the story of ancient maritime trade, uncovering lost treasures and forgotten histories that continue to inspire us. Modern discoveries in archaeology are rewriting the story of ancient maritime trade, peeling back layers of time to reveal secrets long hidden beneath the waves. Thanks to cutting-edge technology, we're now able to explore underwater landscapes with unprecedented precision. Tools like sonar imaging and underwater drones have transformed the way we investigate shipwrecks, submerged ports, and even entire underwater cities. These advancements are not just about finding artifacts, they're about piecing together the intricate networks that connected ancient civilizations. Take, for example, the recent discovery of a shipwreck off the coast of Turkey, dating back to the Bronze Age. Using sonar technology, researchers were able to map the wreck in stunning detail, uncovering cargo that included copper ingots, pottery, and even remnants of food supplies. These findings provide a tangible link to the lives of ancient sailors and traders, offering clues about the goods they carried and the routes they followed. It's like opening a time capsule, one that reveals how interconnected the ancient world truly was. Another groundbreaking discovery comes from the submerged ruins of Dwarka, an ancient city off the coast of India. Once a bustling hub of maritime trade, Dwarka is now underwater, but its remains tell a story of a thriving port that connected the Indian subcontinent with distant lands. Underwater drones have captured detailed images of its streets, buildings, and even what appears to be a harbor. These findings are shedding light on trade routes that were once thought to be purely mythological, proving that many ancient legends have roots in historical fact. But it's not just about the technology, it's about what these discoveries mean for our understanding of history. Each shipwreck, each submerged city, is a piece of a larger puzzle. They help us reconstruct forgotten trade routes, like the ones that connected the Mediterranean with the Indian Ocean or the Red Sea with East Africa. These routes weren't just about commerce, they were channels of cultural exchange, spreading ideas, religions, and innovations across vast distances. As we continue to uncover these underwater treasures, it's clear that the story of ancient maritime trade is far from complete. And speaking of stories, there's another layer to this narrative, one that lives not in the physical remains of the past, but in the tales passed down through generations. This brings us to the role of storytelling in preserving history, a thread we'll explore next. How do myths, legends, and oral traditions keep the memory of these ancient networks alive, even when the physical evidence is lost to time? That's a question that ties the past to the present in fascinating ways. Long before written records became the norm, the stories of ancient maritime trade were kept alive through the power of oral traditions. Picture a group of sailors gathered around a fire, sharing tales of distant lands, treacherous voyages, and the treasures they encountered. These stories weren't just entertainment, they were a way to preserve knowledge, pass down navigation techniques, and teach future generations about the dangers and opportunities of the sea. Oral traditions became the living library of ancient maritime history, with each storyteller adding their own experiences to a growing tapestry of shared wisdom. Myths and legends played a particularly important role in this process. Take, for example, Homer's Odyssey, an epic poem that has captivated audiences for thousands of years. While it's often seen as a work of fiction, the Odyssey is filled with references to real seafaring practices and geography of the ancient Mediterranean. The journey of Odysseus, with its storms, shipwrecks, and encounters with strange lands, reflects the very real challenges faced by ancient mariners. Stories like these weren't just meant to inspire awe, they served as practical guides, warning sailors of potential hazards and offering insights into the cultures they might encounter. Epic poems and legends were also a way to honor the bravery of those who ventured into the unknown. The Phoenicians, for instance, were renowned for their seafaring skills, and their stories of exploration likely inspired generations to push the boundaries of what was known. These narratives were passed down through generations, evolving with each telling but always preserving the core lessons of courage, resourcefulness, and the importance of understanding the sea. But what happens when the environment itself begins to change? The stories of ancient mariners not only reveal their triumphs and struggles, but also hint at how shifts in climate shaped their world. As we move forward, we'll explore how rising sea levels, shifting weather patterns, and other environmental changes influenced the course of ancient maritime trade, and what those changes might teach us about our own relationship with the ocean. As we explore the hidden history of ancient maritime trade networks, it's impossible to ignore the profound influence of climate change on these early routes. Thousands of years ago, rising sea levels and shifting weather patterns didn't just reshape coastlines, they transformed the very foundations of trade. Imagine a world where entire ports vanished underwater, or once thriving trade hubs became isolated due to drought. these were the realities faced by ancient civilizations, and their responses to such challenges reveal a remarkable ability to adapt and innovate. Take, for instance, the ancient city of Lothal in the Indus Valley. Around 4,000 years ago, this bustling port faced the dual threats of rising seas and erratic monsoons. Instead of abandoning their trade networks, the people of Lothal engineered an intricate system of canals and reservoirs to manage water flow and keep their maritime connections alive. This kind of ingenuity wasn't unique to them. Across the Mediterranean, societies rerouted their trade paths to avoid storm-prone areas or built new harbors in safer locations. These adaptations weren't just about survival. They were about thriving in the face of adversity. But what's truly fascinating is how these ancient challenges mirror the ones we face today. Rising sea levels, unpredictable weather, and the need for sustainable solutions are just as pressing now as they were millennia ago. The difference. Today, we have technology and global cooperation on our side. Yet, the resilience and creativity of ancient traders remind us that human ingenuity has always been our greatest asset in overcoming environmental hurdles. As we reflect on these parallels, it's worth considering how these ancient adaptations laid the groundwork for something even larger: the rise of empires. The ability to control and navigate trade routes didn't just keep goods flowing, it shaped the political and economic landscapes of entire regions, and that's where our journey takes us next. How did the mastery of maritime trade transform small kingdoms into sprawling empires? Stay with us as we uncover the pivotal role trade played in shaping the ancient world. The vast, shimmering waters of the Mediterranean and beyond weren't just barriers separating civilizations, they were highways of opportunity, connecting empires and fueling their rise to greatness. Take the Phoenicians, for instance. These master navigators didn't just sail. They built an empire on trade, establishing colonies and ports from modern-day Lebanon all the way to Spain. Their control over the sea lanes gave them access to coveted goods like Tyrian purple dye, cedar wood, and glass, making them indispensable middlemen in the ancient world. But here's the fascinating twist: their success wasn't just about wealth, it was about power. By dominating maritime trade routes, the Phoenicians didn't just grow rich, they became a cultural and economic force that shaped the Mediterranean for centuries. And then there's the Roman Empire, which took the concept of trade-driven power to an entirely new level. As Rome expanded, it didn't just conquer land, it absorbed entire trade networks, from the spice routes of the East to the grain shipments of Egypt. The Mediterranean became their private lake, or as they called it, Mare Nostrum, our sea. This control wasn't just about feeding their growing population or filling their treasuries, it was about projecting influence. Roman goods, ideas, and even gods traveled along these routes, spreading the empire's reach far beyond its borders. But as history shows, this reliance on trade could also be a double-edged sword. When the Vandals disrupted Rome's grain supply from North Africa in the 5th century, it wasn't just an economic blow, it was a crack in the foundation of the empire itself. The Byzantines, too, understood the strategic importance of maritime trade. Sitting at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, Constantinople became the ultimate trading hub, where silk, spices, and gold flowed like water. The Byzantine navy patrolled the seas, ensuring their dominance over key routes like the Bosporus Strait. But even their mastery couldn't withstand the pressures of shifting trade dynamics. As new powers like the Venetians and Genoese emerged, the balance of power began to tip, and with it, the Byzantine Empire's grip on the Mediterranean. This pattern of rise and fall reveals a profound truth. In the ancient world, trade wasn't just about commerce, it was about control. Empires that could dominate the seas could project their influence, amass wealth, and secure their survival. But those same trade routes could also become their Achilles heel. as rivals and invaders sought to seize them for their own gain. As we've seen, maritime trade was the lifeblood of ancient empires, shaping their destinies in ways that still echo through history. But what does all of this mean for us today? How do these ancient networks connect to the world we live in now? Let's bring it all together in the final section, where we'll explore the lasting legacy of these ancient trade routes and how they continue to influence our modern world. As we near the end of our journey through the hidden history of ancient maritime trade networks, let's take a moment to reflect on the extraordinary stories we've uncovered. From the earliest seafaring pioneers who braved uncharted waters to the vast networks that linked continents, these ancient traders were the architects of a global exchange long before the modern world as we know it existed. Their ingenuity and resilience not only connected distant civilizations, but also laid the foundation for the cultural, economic, and technological advancements that followed. Think about it, these early mariners didn't have GPS or satellites to guide them. They relied on the stars, the winds, and their own determination to navigate treacherous seas. They carried more than just goods, they transported ideas, beliefs, and innovations, weaving a tapestry of shared knowledge that shaped the course of history. Whether it was the Phoenicians trading purple dye, the Greeks spreading their art and philosophy, or the Polynesians mastering the vast Pacific, each culture left an indelible mark on the world. The legacy of these ancient trade routes is still with us today. From the spices in our kitchens to the languages we speak, their influence is woven into the fabric of our daily lives. It's a testament to the power of human connection and the enduring impact of those who dared to explore beyond the horizon. If this journey has sparked your curiosity, there's so much more to discover. Visit a museum, dive into a history book, or even travel to the ancient ports that once buzzed with activity. Every story you uncover adds another piece to the puzzle of our shared past. Before we wrap up, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of this ancient maritime history fascinated you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this exploration, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Together, we'll keep uncovering the hidden histories that shape our world. Until next time, keep exploring.